Hi, so today I am going to think aloud as you are looking at some of the ideas that we have for small group reading in a virtual setting. So, this slide deck was created back in March. Just to give you a little bit of background, I had graduate students who are on their way to becoming reading specialists, and then the pandemic happened, schools closed, and we needed to just get some ideas down on how to teach a small group, how to teach a guided reading group, how to just teach reading via virtual setting, especially as a reading specialist. So, this is where this deck originated from. And then along the way, after brainstorming more this summer, and as we're planning for this year for remote and hybrid and all that jazz, it's been modified along the way. So, again, this is just a deck full of ideas that you can hopefully then tailor to your own setting and use as you like. It is not meant to teach all in one session, obviously, because our groups have various goals and will need different activities and interventions. So, some guiding questions for planning, and I'm not putting this in present mode just because there will be some manipulation aspects here in just a few minutes. But it's even more so critical to just remember these three guiding questions or statements, really, for planning for whatever scenario that we're in the fall and throughout the year in general. So, what are my students' goals? More importantly, approximately how long can my students stay engaged in a lesson? That there's a lot of factors behind that: home life, age, reading readiness, um, digital readiness, if that's a word. Um, what device are they using? How accessible do they have? How accessible is the internet? Do you need to convert this for anytime learning or asynchronous learning? Or is this something that can be created for when you're meeting with your students synchronously or for real time learning? So, again, a lot of these activities are inspired from Jan Richardson. We use Jan Richardson, the next step forward in guided reading. Um, we use her books, we use her plans throughout the graduate course and also just throughout my professional learning. So that's why I have this example here. So many of the activities that you'll notice stem from Jan Richardson. Her guided reading lesson plans are available on her website as well as in her book. So I did not come up with these activities on my own. Again, I was inspired by Jan Richardson and thinking, how do I use these same strategies and activities via digital platform? So, like I mentioned in previous conversations, I try to stick to a three-part lesson. Typically, there's some sort of review, either there's sight words or we're making words, or if you're teaching bilingual reading, we're reviewing syllables. Something to just emphasize again that alphabetic knowledge development, something to support phonemic awareness, right? So that's like typically my first part of the lesson. And then the second part of the lesson is we're actually reading books, right? The student is reading, I'm coaching, I'm prompting, we're reading together, I'm modeling. So all that jazz. Again, if you need more examples of how to facilitate that, Jen Richardson has amazing videos if you have her books. And so then the third part of that is then really focusing on word study. And I usually just stick to two activities for word study because I like to keep it simple. So we're either making words based on that skill or we're working on word sorts, which I mainly use words or way sorts, but there's other resources as well out there. So for sight words, this is probably the easiest activity to digitize because you can just create slides with the words, make them nice and bold and large for students to easily see with student friendly font, and then you can just share your screen and review it with them. So I have a few here just so you kind of know what it looks like. And the font that I used here was Didact Gothic. Chelsea Market is another one if you're on Google Slides, just because it mimics how I would write it on the board for my students or how I would write it on the note cards for them. So just something to consider. For your book work, what I like to call your book work when you're reading your book, again, keeping it simple. If you have access to Reading A to Z, they actually have those books available digitally where you can share your screen. So let me just go to that reading site real quick. There are other sites like Epic and Mayan. Epic is free for teachers. Mayan requires a school subscription. I'm not sure if they have a personal subscription. We have a district subscription to Reading A to Z. But what's nice about Reading A to Z is that not only are all your books leveled and you have various access to different types of text, but what I love about Reading A to Z is that I don't need to do any extra steps if I want to project my book. So, what does that mean? I don't have to scan in any text, I don't have to screenshot any images and put them on a separate slide. If you are familiar with Reading A to Z, they have these links here if you want to ever just share it with your students, like download a PDF. But projectable is very, very beneficial during your real-time learning, so your synchronous, if the students are in front of you digitally. And so the book takes up the whole screen, so you'll have to share it with your students. But more importantly, you have tools here. You have a pen, right, where you can actually write on the page or on the screen. And then you have different colored highlighters as well, where I can highlight certain patterns that I want them to focus on. And what's nice about this is that I'll actually save it under your account and I can just print it. And with my annotations, there's other things here that you can play around with, like if you're annotating, there's stickers, things like that. But I mostly use the pen and the highlighters. And when you're done, modeling this with students and reading it with students, you can actually print them a copy with your annotation so that they can have it as a reference. So something that we like to do, especially for my more emergent readers, we'll highlight certain sight words or certain spelling patterns. And so then I do this face to face, right? I highlight it with a real highlighter, but now digitally, I now can recreate that in a few simple steps. So again, it kind of shows you here how to get to the book, right? If you don't have access to Reading A to Z, there are read alouds on YouTube. And another step that probably requires, another option that requires more steps is actually screenshotting or scanning in pages of books. Hopefully you don't have to get to that point. Reading A to Z is the site that I'm most familiar with and that has these skills. There might be others out there. Introducing a new sight word. So this is Jan Richardson's process of introducing a new sight word. She actually collaborated with Jack Hartman. So if you're familiar with the Jack Hartman videos, and they actually go through the what is missing scenario. And there's a ton of videos on here. So on YouTube, I've linked the video here for you too. On YouTube, just look up Jack Hartman and Jan Richardson, and they have a ton of these what is missing videos that'll guide students for when you're introducing new sight words. Another option is just creating these slides, and it only took me 4 slides, right? You have the sight word, and then you delete the letter, right? I just created a text box, delete the letter, and put an underscore there. And then again, delete the other letter and ask them what's missing. So again, right at this point right now, you're doing a lot of sharing of the screen. And then in the next few slides, this is where the students can manipulate. Mix and fix is one that the students can manipulate. So you can just create text boxes or screenshot letter tiles from anywhere on Google and then share this screen with the students. You can duplicate it too if you need multiple slides, if you have multiple students, and they can just manipulate these letters and put the sight word together. There are other ideas in Spanish as well. We follow similar formats but different. We focus more on syllables and making words in Spanish. So if you need any ideas in that aspect, just let me know. So this is where it gets more interesting. So if you share your slide deck with your students, you can create, I know there's applications like Google Jamboard out there that are more student friendly, but ours is blocked. So we're sticking to Google Slides. So we can share this again with our students and they can manipulate the images for sorting for initial sounds. So again, I just screenshotted some sorts that I had digitally or had scanned in and then just put them there. With making words, I can again screenshot a few letters, right? The letters that I need, and I can model it for students and then give them their own slide so that they can then manipulate these letters and form the words as I'm prompting them. So you can see that I duplicated it 4 times because I would have 4 students. I can also have them type out the words, but again, I have found that just manipulating the images, it's just more hands-on and less, it has less steps for the students. For sound boxes, I do have another video on how to create sound boxes, but really it's just creating a few shapes here that they can manipulate. You can model on the screen for them, and they can then practice that on their own as you're walking them through, again, certain phonemic awareness activities, whether you're blending, segmenting, etc. Here's a different example. This one I just took a background that I liked from an actual document that I use in my students in real life when I was face to face with them, and then I just created these shapes to represent the markers. So again, to help them throughout these Alcon boxes or sound boxes activities. And then word study and word sorts. This is the way in March where I was like, I'm just going to type out the words and they can manipulate it, right? Now I've learned that you can create backgrounds. So this is not editable in terms of like the students can't change this. And then I insert images here. So I'll link another video here where I actually walk through the process of how to create this. And then again, I can always right click and duplicate it so that students can, okay, go to slide 30. You're on slide 30 and let's walk through the letters. Let's walk through the word sorts together. What do you notice about the spelling patterns, etc. And there's also an example in Spanish. So again, huge slide deck with so many ideas. How does it actually look like? Here's an example. So if I am teaching on Zoom or on Google Meets with my students, I can share this slide deck with them, right? I can duplicate it. I like to think of these as whiteboards. I can duplicate these slides and assign each student a quote unquote whiteboard and say, okay, Jill, you are on slide 1. Diana, you're on slide 2. And I can model it for them and then they can have their time to practice on their own. Same with making words, right? So we would do, if I had an example of a group, we would focus on phonemic awareness and then either work on making words or word sorts, and then obviously connecting it all to a text. So yeah, organization is definitely on a personal preference. I think that I'm going to stay organized by having one of these for each of my groups that I'm meeting with synchronously. And the nice thing about these is that it's a lot of work initially, but once you have your originals, right, all your word sorts together, all your sound boxes together, all your word study materials together, then really you're just copying and pasting right to the slide deck that you need. So, yeah, I hope you enjoy and have fun, and hopefully, this sparked a lot of um, ideas for you. And I will be sharing more videos in terms of how do I create these word sorts again if you don't have access to digital resources in that way. Enjoy.